tutorial for the Ancient Egypt website. In this session, we'll take a look at our learning objectives, take a look at what spaced repetition is and how it's been implemented, quick demonstration, and then a discussion of some user scenarios. After completing this module, you should be able to describe the elements of spaced repetition and also its benefits. You should understand how to use the features as implemented on this website, and you should also be able to describe the constraints on the website. So, spaced repetition is a feature that online flashcard systems typically have, and it's designed to increase user productivity. The system allows users to rate their comfort with each item as either easy, hard, not known, or an incorrect answer given, and then it uses that information to change the number of days before a given item will be presented again. So as a result of this, new or problematic items will be presented every day, but known items get pushed further and further into the future with each correct test. The benefits of this are largely in the area of efficiency, because you don't spend your time going over and over material that you already know well, and you spend your time on new items and items that you're having trouble with. It also reduces boredom by not forcing you to go over stuff that you know. And also, as the number of items increases, the value of this function increases as well, because at a certain point, there are just so many items available that without some sort of a filter, you're just not going to be able to manage it. In the case of Hawk, by the end of chapter 16, there are over 580 different vocabulary items. And I think a final benefit is that by focusing on a small number of new or problematic items each time, it encourages you to use mnemonics or other techniques to learn them rather than just taking a brute force approach. So how have we done it for this website? As anybody who's used Anki knows, these features can become very complicated. The learning curve can be steep, and there are a lot of bells and whistles and buttons and levers that can be modified. And that makes it a bit opaque, and it can increase the learning curve. So we've implemented a very simple version of spaced repetition for this website. Doesn't require much of a learning curve, and it does not mean that you have to register or log on to the system. So let's take a look at how this works. In brown, we have the original flow, which is still available, and in blue, we show the new features of the spaced repetition function. So you start by selecting a card set, maybe all the nouns in chapter 1. But before displaying them, it goes out to its little database and it checks to see if any of those have a due date that's in the future. And if so, it takes them out of the deck so that they won't be presented today. It then presents you a card, asks you for how well you did with it, updates the scores, and then before it shows you the next card, it takes those scores, takes the input, and determines when it will show you that card again. When will the next due date be? So, a couple of implementation details. You can use this or not use it every time you select a flashcard function. The default is to ignore the functionality, but you can check a little box, as you'll see, anytime you do run a flashcard. It does not store any user information. Does not require any registration, so that's good from a privacy point of view. It does store a single numeric key as a cookie on your user device and uses that to display the information associated with your previous efforts. And finally, it allows the user to modify the database as follows. If it's easy, it moves the item out to the next frequency slot and uses that new value to set the next presentation date. If it's hard, it'll show the card tomorrow, but then it'll go back to whatever distance it was before, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. If you mark it as wrong, it resets the frequency slot to 1, which is for 0 days, and starts you from the beginning again. And if you select next card, It'll show the next card, but it won't do anything with the database itself. It keeps separate lists for each of the 3 flashcard functions, and they can be independently managed. Because it is tied to a cookie, if you use a different system, so for example, your laptop and you use an iPad, it will keep track of those separately. So you just need to be aware of that. The benefit, on the other hand, of course, is that you didn't have to do any registration. You don't need to log on, put in a password, anything like that. You can reset any one of the lists to its initial state, and then it'll treat all items as new. And here are the frequency slots. So basically it starts out, with 0 days, then 1 day, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and then it'll stay at 34 forever. And also you should take a note that the updates will kick in the next time you go back to the selection screen. One thing you do need to be aware of is that if you have done the reset function to basically wipe out the little database, and then you go through and make some answers and then just back up to the selection screen, because the selection screen has not been refreshed, it will still have that box checked. And you could get yourself into a situation where it seems to be deleting all of your changes, and it's probably because you left that checkbox checked. So let's take a quick look at how this is going to be implemented. So here from the main menu, we're going to go into the flashcards for the vocabularies. And you see it looks pretty much like the setup before. I can select Chapter 1, Nouns, but I've got 2 new checkboxes down here. I can indicate that I want to use spaced repetition, and also if I want to clear out the database, I can click the Reset Spaced Repetition Data checkbox. I don't want to do that right now because I've set some information up in here. And now I select Online Flashcards. So now what you'll see is that it's got 4 cards in the deck. But if you recall, Chapter 1 actually has more than that number of nouns. It actually has 8 of them. And over here in the debugging information, you can see that we've got 8 different ones. This indicates what slot it's in, and I've got some that are in slot 1. And so their due dates are set out to the 14th of December, and today is the 13th of December. So the only ones it's going to show me are the ones on the 14th. So if I go in there, I can say easy, I can say hard, wrong, whatever. I've done all of my ones. And then if I go back and then go in again, you'll see that it's changed the selections for my various dates. So very straightforward. As I say, the only thing you need to be aware of is if you have done a reset, that will be checked, and if you back up to it, you'll want to uncheck that before going forward. So let's take a quick look at user scenarios before we conclude. The best time to not use spaced repetition, the original function, is when you're initially learning a new set of items, and also when you're studying for a test with a focused set of items like Chapter 4, Chapter 5, whatever the case might be. Because you really don't want to have things pushed out into the future in that scenario. You want to just kind of go over them and over them. Generally, I would say spaced repetition is what you should use on a regular day-to-day basis for the items that you've already learned. So once you've covered a chapter, flip it into spaced repetition mode. And when should you reset the system? I think the key thing there is if you find that the repetition are not matching your knowledge level. The literature suggests that you want to be able to answer 85 to 90% of the questions fairly easily. And so if you're finding that you can't get to that level, you may want to move out of spaced repetition mode and just use the original mode to build up your knowledge of those ones. And then the other thing you might want to do is perhaps 2 or 3 weeks before you've got a major exam, go do a reset and then go back into having a lot of the items reviewed on a very regular basis as you move into that. So that really concludes our coverage of spaced repetition. At this point, you should be able to describe what it is, why it's good, how it's been implemented on this website, and also describe the constraints that are imposed on its use on this website.